Hey, thanks for tuning in to the Art of SBA Lending. Today in the podcast, we have a 2-for-1. Javier Jorge is back with another appearance here on the podcast, and this time he's brought with him a friend, SBA veteran Eduardo Sosa. Both are SBA directors at banks, Eduardo in Texas, Javier down here in Florida, and they both happen to speak Spanish, and we discussed an apparent gap in communication between SBA lenders and the Spanish-speaking communities, and why banks should be taking a real close look at what they could be doing to address it and even capitalize on it. Now, before we get started, I have one very important announcement. Get ready for the most prestigious late afternoon event in the SBA lending industry. March 2nd, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Tune in live on Zoom for the first annual BDO Awards. Watch as SBA business development professionals from all over the country receive recognition for all of their outstanding achievements. I'll leave all the details in the show notes as well as the link so that you can reserve your spot at the event. Now, without further ado, let's get into it. Eduardo, I've never met you, so it's nice to meet you. Javier, I know. How do you guys know each other?
Well, if I may take that one, I was very fortunate to be part of the inaugural class of the NAGLE Future Leading Lenders course. And
is that another certificate up on your wall over there?
I have to put it up in a minute, but it hasn't made it up on the wall yet. And Eduardo was my mentor throughout the entire process. So whether he wanted to or not, he had a full dose of Javier for a full year. I don't know if that was for the better or for the worse, but for me, at least, it was amazing.
I've had the good luck of knowing Javier for a little bit over the year now, and really did that mentoring really helped me a lot. One of the benefits that I tell people about participating in this mentorship program is that I've learned a whole bunch more than what I ever thought I'd learn from the experience. Obviously, with Javier's background, that helped me a lot.
Can you give me an example of something that you learned as a mentor?
Well, one of the things that Javier is very technology oriented, and I tend not to be. I'm in the older generation, and he's a much younger generation. And he was throwing out some concepts of some of the ways that we could do things easier, faster for the client using technology that I was going, what was that? And so he would explain what each term meant and educate me in that manner. So that's been very beneficial to me.
How long have you been a NAGLE mentor?
Well, I've been a member of the board for 7 years now. And so that's 2 full terms plus a partial one. It was 3-year terms. But in the NAGLE FLL mentorship, this is just my 2nd year.
Okay, cool. So what is your background, Eduardo? Did you start out as a BDO?
Exactly. Back in 1996, started out as a BDO with a bank that was new to the state, to the United States. Well, actually to the state of Texas, not to the United States. Banco Popular, many years ago, came from Puerto Rico to Texas to establish the SBA lending world. I was fortunate enough to join them then, and as the saying goes, the rest is history.
You're a director now at a bank, right?
Yeah. Now I've had the good fortune of leading 2 startup departments. So from BDO to start managing my own places.
Was it one of those things as a BDO where you're like, I think I can do this better, and you go and start your own shop?
Actually not. To be quite honest with you, I enjoyed the BDO function a lot. Primarily because it was very independent. The BDOs, their responsibility is to find transaction. So you've got to be creative on how you reach out to your referral sources, how do you identify good opportunities, and how to make them, turn them fast from getting the paperwork to getting it approved and getting them closed. To me, that was very exciting. The politics and the backroom stuff of having your own shop has not been the most enjoyable. But it's also part of the equation. When you're growing in your profession, you sometimes face things that you don't like, and sometimes you do things that you do like. So it tries to be a balance in trying to apply your knowledge and hopefully enrich other people's knowledge as well.
Javier, what did you end up learning from this guy over here, Eduardo, with all his experience?
It's a long list, too long for this show. Amongst many, I think Eduardo really is opening my eyes on the national community, right, of NAGLE and the importance of establishing those relationships across institutions. At the end of the day, and Ray, you know this, Eduardo taught me that we are a community serving the small business side of the economy, and it's collaborative. We're technically competitors, but I think I call Eduardo for advice on several topics, and he's encouraged me to reach out to others, my peer groups, especially when you're the director of a shop. There's not too many people within your organization that you can tap, right? A lot of people are looking up to you. So reaching out to others in the industry, especially with, the wealth of knowledge that Eduardo has and several others in the industry, really helps facilitate that process and gives me the confidence to continue to perform. I hope that makes sense.
Are you guys both hiring? Do you both hire BDOs at your shops?
Yes.
Well, Javier does. In our shop, we are predominantly driven by the generation of business by the line lending officers.
So kind of like the business, that's like the business bankers, like within the bank, you mean? So you're kind of like serving your existing customers, basically.
Well, no, they're still looking for new business. Because in this shop, it's really unique in that it's we're a 4-year-old bank, so we're still growing.
Young.
And so they're out on the street knocking on doors trying to get business in general. So they'll explore all sorts of opportunities, and the SBA is one of the arrows that they've got available to address particular needs of a client.
Gotcha. So you're kind of cross-training these folks who might have dabbled in SBA in the past, and you're just helping them learn more about it.
And assure that they stay within the straight and narrow of the guidelines from SBA. Because one of the things that under the SBA program is that it is very I-dotting and T-crossing oriented. And in the conventional world, that's not the case. It's a little bit more of a wild, wild west than the SBA world. So it's a matter of corralling them and having them go down the path of the guidelines as opposed to the wide open aspect of it.
Some of them might like it. I love it. I think it's the best thing ever. It's hard to do both, like to get your mind back and forth between conventional SBA. It
is a difficult transition for a lot of them. And some of them do very well at it, and some of them don't thrive as well under it. You also have to have the mindset that it's a good tool for the client. That's not a bad thing in the people's mind, is that they're just not into it. They're not used to it. After, I've got a couple of very senior folks that have barely know how to spell SBA, much less speak it knowledgeably.
Yeah, I used to hear a lot about how people really look down upon SBA within the bank, thinking like you don't want to do that. It's like a lot of paperwork, and the process is bad, and there's probably some truth to some of that. But I've seen it less lately, especially after PPP, where SBA stepped up and saved the small business community. And I'm hearing it less and less, but there's still some of it out there.
Oh, yes, there's still some of that out there. But, I like to point out to people, especially the old traditional objections that they've had. One of them was too much paperwork. And I'm going, the sad thing about it is that there's only 2 forms in addition to everything else that the conventional lender gets that's part of the SBA world. And both of those forms are kind of check-in the box type forms that a small business person can take care of in less than 2-3 minutes. So I'm sitting there going, so what's the objection, or what's the quote-unquote more paperwork involved? Yes, in the back room, we have to do a little bit more paperwork than the conventional side. We have to do the verification of the tax returns that they don't do in the conventional world. And that I think they should do in the conventional world, by the way, because that is a very good tool to verify that customer is actually providing you the same information that they provided at IRS. We check on the UCC filings. We check with their good standing with the state Secretary of State's office here in Texas. So, we do a lot of extra little step, but that's all back room. From the front end, just 2 more forms, and that's it.
It's funny, Javier. You were telling me the other day about how you're helping, change some forms into Spanish for SBA, and I was wondering if you can also change some of them into English.
I'll put that on my list, Ray. I'll put that on my list.
Is Eduardo working with you on that?
So I'm trying to loop Eduardo in. We've been in communication with the district office out of Georgia that has been tasked with the SBA, has been tasked to translating the documents over from English to Spanish. A few of those have already been in process, like the 413 and the 1919. But additional documentation, I'm just honored that we can be a part of that. And Eduardo's just taking a different perspective. Being, I think this is one of the topics of for today is, Spanish is a language, but the Hispanic community is not one community, one group, right? We're of many different origins, of many different cultures, but yet we're trying to condense everyone to use the same process and thought, and procedures. So it's fun stuff.
Well, and if I may add on to that, I think my value would be diminished, or at least be used more in Texas and maybe some of the other border states rather than somebody like in Florida. Because you really look at my Spanish, I was born and raised on the border here with Mexico. So my Spanish is a melding of English and Spanish, not necessarily the more appropriate Spanish, let's say, of even the interior of Mexico or of Cuba or Central America or South America. It's very different language. We're still naming things here trocas instead of camiones, carros instead of coches, little odds and ends like that are make communication clearer in some aspects of it. But really, it's amazing to me how that different culture, that different upbringing that we all have in the Hispanic community, and that we try and make people aware that we are not homogeneous. We are definitely a different culture, a different aspect, depending on what part of the Latin American world that our backgrounds are in. So it's very interesting, and it's a daunting task to try and develop documentation that will cross all those various languages.
So, Javier, what's the point of translating these forms into Spanish? Is the idea to try to get more access to capital to Spanish-speaking communities?
That is the main attempt or goal, Ray. I think the SBA is identifying that the Hispanic community is a growing market and an important market within the small business space. And that is the intent. Although, as Eduardo already pointed out, the nuances between the different cultures, we're never going to get it perfect. right, where it's going to be exactly the way, but it's a lot better than having it in English. So that is one step in the right direction to help assist these entrepreneurs in accessing capital to grow their businesses in the communities that we all live in.
Yeah. So I'm in South Florida, Eduardo. I'm in Palm Beach, so it's not Miami. But obviously large Hispanic community over here. And I don't speak Spanish, and I've done a handful of loans for entrepreneurs who just prefer to speak Spanish. It's just a preference. They're more comfortable with it. So we use a translator, or someone in their family or close to them will, be on calls with us. But it just shows you kind of like that the fact that they have to do that to get capital, when they should have someone like Javier who can just speak with them about these financial statements in Spanish very fluently. So Javier, how many of your customers speak Spanish?
I would say dedicated Spanish, at least 15-20%, Spanglish, where there is across, the I would say the more traditional type of Spanish business speak. I'd probably say at least 50% of my business, and then the rest would be traditional English speaking. So more than half of my business is Spanish or Spanish oriented.
That's a lot, and you do a lot of deals, so that's a lot of people.
Hey, there's not too many people doing business in Spanish, so I take it.
Yeah, because I understand why more access to capital would help the Hispanic community, and politically, I know why SBA wants more financing for minorities, different females, veterans. They're always pushing that type of stuff. But what's the opportunity for the bank to be more thoughtful about the way they approach these different Spanish-speaking communities?
If I may, I think I can elaborate more from let's just be dollars and cents, right? From a market opportunity, some great data points for us to consider when we're making decisions on our market, right? Because we're all trying to, meet the needs of this market that we all participate in. And this is all information from the SBA directly. And, nearly 1 in 4 new businesses is Hispanic owned, right? So that's a significant portion of the business growth. Currently, we have nearly 5 million Hispanic-owned businesses in the United States, contributing over $800 billion to the U.S. economy. Those businesses employ over 1 million workers, providing $100 billion in payroll. And in the decade preceding the pandemic, the number of Hispanic businesses has grown by 34% when compared to non-Hispanic speaking business owners that just grew 1%. So if you're looking at growth trends over time, the Hispanic business owner is becoming a bigger and bigger piece of the pie. And why is that happening? I think a lot of that has to do with the overall demographics and population of the United States. UCLA has stated that the U.S. Latino population has reached 62.5 million in 2021, accounting for 19% of the U.S. population, up from 13% in 2000. Providing a 54% growth over that period. It's incredible. And the Pew Research Group is stating that by 2050, the Hispanic population will account for about a third of the entire population of the United States. So if you're a lender and you're trying to plan where you're going to get your provide access to capital, if you don't have some level of interest or focus into this group, you're going to be missing out on a third of your entire population. And that's nationally. I mean, we're talking about state of Florida, state of Texas, that we all participate in. I would say that population's much larger.
Which the states where SBA is most popular, California, Texas, Florida, Arizona, you got more hotspots down there. They probably have more Spanish-speaking community members because of where they're located. So there's a market, right? And just like a lot of things with our industry, we're a little bit behind the curve with the times. Like, what would it look like if I wanted to say, you know what, I didn't think about that. I run a shop and we're not addressing this whole segment of the community here. What would that look like in terms of, like, I would think you would have to recruit the right people within your shop to do that, right? What else would you have to do?
Well, you're right. You have to recruit Because at the end of the day, we have to be realistic in that people are going to be comfortable doing business with people that look like themselves. So I'm a big believer in not necessarily recruiting within our shop, but recruiting even out externally so we can bring in more Hispanic BDOs, more Hispanic lending officers to the table, because it surprises me how many organizations I've dealt with in California, in Texas, in Florida, in a lot of other states where they have nobody in their shop that speaks Spanish. And that is missing a significant segment of that marketplace. But one of the first things that I know that I've talked to other people about doing is that one of the first things you got to do is bring somebody in that speaks the language, that can communicate, that customer's comfortable dealing with, as opposed to this and let's get honest as to what the majority out there, lily white individual male going and knocking on the door, and because that's not going to get them that's not going to get their foot in the door, and once you get that foot in the door, that leads to other opportunities. Because it's very true in the Hispanic community, like it is in the Anglo community. Birds of a feather flock together. So you're going to get a successful businessman. He's going to refer you to his friend who's also a successful businessman. But you've got to get that foot in the door in the first place.
To piggyback on Eduardo's comment, I 100% agree. If that option's on the table, you hire a native speaker, right, to be a part of the team. Now, that is being said in a current condition in an economy where we have extreme labor shortages, and then you even go in a subset within the SBA, which is even more extreme from a labor shortage perspective. So this is a daunting task. I mean, as a director, where do you find these people? How do you get them?
Chatterbox.
Yeah, that's a shout out to Dustin. But it's definitely a big hurdle. But my recommendation to other SBA shops or BDOs that don't speak Spanish is, to your point, Ray, you've done business with people that are willing to go above and beyond in order to get access to capital. And my argument is that, my experience within this group, and not, it doesn't apply to all, but to the good chunk that have that fire and desire, they can have a translator, they can have an intermediary group. Just having the will or the desire to reach out to them and acknowledge that there is a gap in language or communication, but that you have the patience, that you have the resources in order to assist them as best as you can, they're going to work with you, right? Because even with the ideal state being a native speaker that's all in Spanish and completely seamless, that's not where we are today. And that need is existing today, and it's continuing to grow. So my challenge to the industry would be, start working with them now. Reach out to them, let them know that we are interested in helping you. And the SBA is very interested. There's no reason why we should go against the current. Let's use the tailwinds and move forward.
Well, your colleague Javier posted the first ever Spanish SBA tombstone I've ever seen, which I was very impressed with. I mean, do you know what the response was from that at all, or it's too soon to tell? Because he posted it, and I just haven't seen that before. And I think with marketing, one, you have to speak to your audience, right? So when if I'm speaking to one type of business owner, let's say blue collar versus a doctor, right? You want to speak their language as much as possible. And that goes for the Spanish speaking community as well. So that's step one, right?
Shout out to Danny. Yeah. He took the initiative. We were talking, there's a big focus that we have, knowing that our market is significantly Hispanically leaning. The response has been great, right? I think he's already gotten 4 communications. I don't know how many of those are going to be leads, but I mean, we're just talking about a couple days ago. I believe is
just
when
one post.
Yeah, one post in Spanish, and that's an amazing data point on the need to service this community.
Yeah, and understanding there's different cultures within the Spanish-speaking community. If you can just do your best, Eduardo, to kind of tell us, like, what do banks need to know about these sub-communities within the Hispanic community in terms of how they think, right? Because I find probably a larger proportion of Hispanic people that I've dealt with, borrowers, seem entrepreneurial. It just seems like a lot of folks that come here first, second generation start businesses.
Well, I think one of the things that the business community as a whole needs to learn is to avoid the stereotypes. You've got to enter into all business communications with an open mind in order to relate, as you were saying, Ray, to your audience, to talk to them about their particular need, not the product that you're trying to sell. And that's a difficult lesson for anybody to learn, much less when you're dealing with a different culture that you're not familiar with yourself. And that I think is the biggest mistake that I see a lot of bankers make, is that they try and impose their background on their borrowers, and that doesn't work. And that's whether you're talking about the Hispanic community, the Black community, the Asian community, whatever community you want to talk to, is that it's very difficult. Well, a lot of people find it difficult to put themselves in the shoes of their customer and try and address them on their level as opposed to on your level. That is a key in all aspects of it. Whether you're, and I'm talking about just generally, but particularly in the Hispanic community, they have to learn to put those stereotypes to one side and just deal with the individual, with that business person on the same level that you would on anybody else, and that's a trick in my viewpoint.
Yeah, and Javier was educating me the other day on something that I hadn't thought about as someone who has always lived here. But in some of these other countries, the financial institutions aren't as strong, and so when you come here, we know the financial institutions to be very strong, and you trust them. And I didn't even think about that, Javier.
Well, I mean, you look at Mexico. Mexico's financial institutions down there. Financing is not available for homes. Very little available for businesses. And then the infrastructure is set up essentially for the rich to get richer and everybody else to stay the same or lose. And that's a different concept when you come to the United States. They're not used to going to the bank to get financing. So when that opportunity presents themselves here, many times they'll jump at it, but a lot of times they'll be very reticent to deal with it because they've got that legacy history there that they need to overcome. But they're some of the hardest working individuals, because you think about the risks that they've taken, leaving their home country for whatever reason to come to the United States, and a lot of them are here by themselves. A lot of them are here trying to eke out a living, and they take the risk of jumping to the next step of getting into their own business. And I mean, think about that. You're jumping into your own business in a culture that you're not aware of, with limited access to English, with not knowing the laws of our country. It's a tremendous risk on their part, and to be, in my book, that's to be respected and honored, as opposed to look down their noses because they may not be as fluent as the next person is.
Absolutely.
To compound on that, Eduardo, I couldn't agree more. And, I look at it, there's two sides to that coin, that there is, because of the majority, and I think this really applies to any immigrant, right? Anyone who is leaving their home to come to a new place with the purpose of making a better future for their family, right? I mean, that's someone who is not risk averse. That's someone who is, we talk about good borrowers or people who have skin in the game. I don't think you can have more skin in the game than leaving everything behind and making it happen, right? But a lot of these individuals are coming from countries that, to your point, Ray, don't have the same pro-business mindset that the United States has, right? So the infrastructure is not in place. The laws for businesses are convoluted or difficult. There could be corruption. So if you, and access to capital, either it doesn't exist, to Eduardo's point, or the interest rates are, high double digits, 20, 30, 40%, and it just doesn't make sense. So imagine you're an entrepreneur and you have a business in these countries, you're stepping into the United States. That's a whole different environment. From their perspective, when you're quoting SBA rates, Ray, to a traditional U.S. born and educated individual, they're high. But when you're talking to someone who's coming from another country where their rates are much higher than ours, they're cheap, they're a bargain. So, this another carrot for the lenders out there. If you build that trust, right, and that confidence in the system that we have, you're not going to have the same pushback in, rates or fees, because they see the value in that that is being provided. So it's been one of my success selling points. I think Eduardo can agree with me on that point as well. But yeah, this is a different group through and through. There's a lot of dynamics that are influencing their decision making and their experience.
It's a great point. Oh, it's good. I'm glad we're having the conversation, because it's not one we've had on this podcast, and that's just a start. So we'll keep it going, man. But thank you both for coming on and chatting today.
Thank you, Ray.
Appreciate you having me.
All right, that's it for this week. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode of The Art of SBA Lending. And if you have any feedback or suggestions, email me at ray@artofsba.com. Until next time, ta-ta.